Hey everybody, Martinez here. I'm going to go ahead and read a little bit from my book, Helen and Troy's Epic Road Quest. It's my newest book, my 10th novel, out in stores now. It's a fantasy, urban, modern day fantasy. It's kind of hard to classify, but basically it's if you took the Odyssey and a road trip movie and combined them and you end up with that. Helen and Troy are the main characters, but I'm going to actually read from chapter 4, which introduces Nigel Skullgnasher. He's an orc, and in this world, the orcs are basically just like any other group of people. They just have their history, and what you really just got to remember is that this is an alternate version of our world where magic and myth is real, and a lot of the fantasy elements are real. The main thing is here is there's parallels, and one of the big parallels is that there is no firearms in this world, just because the gods forbid it. But other than that, you really don't need to know too much, hopefully, and I'm going to go ahead and start reading and see what we get. All right. Nigel Skullgnasher's midlife crisis hadn't been much different from any other. He'd gotten that tattoo and some piercings, started working out, began dressing inappropriately for his age, had his tusks sharpened. His wife had been tolerant of these new habits, just as long as he didn't try trading her in for a younger model, which he never would have done because, by Orc tradition, divorce could come only after a duel to the death, and he wasn't at all certain he could take her in a fight. He wasn't unhappy with his wife or his marriage. He just wanted to feel young again, to tap into his ancestral spirit, to feel the wind in his black hair, to ride as part of the horde, to plunder and pillage and be feared and respected. He ended up settling for the next best thing and joining a motorcycle club. There wasn't any pillaging. His Harley Dragonson twin cam parked in the heated garage saw the open road only on the weekends. But he traveled the open road in his nightly dreams, barreled down the endless highway where his hideous gods waited to reward anyone who could make the final journey across the broken plains, where every orc soul meant its final reward. He brought his motorcycle to a sudden stop. A cloud of dust and sweet exhaust in his wake swept over him. He wiped the grime from his face, pulled off his obscured goggles, and used his tongue to loosen a fly stuck in his teeth, which he swallowed. He'd reached the foot of the gray mountain. No orc ever saw the mountain and lived, so he must have been dead. He didn't remember dying, but it was the only explanation. Perhaps in his sleep, he'd just gone for his checkup, and the doctor had mentioned it would be good to cut his cholesterol, but hadn't made it seem like a big deal. He was most mad that he'd skipped dessert tonight. Death he could deal with, but it would have been nice to have a slice of cherry pie before bleaching under the cruel skies for eternity. He opened the cooler beside the mound of unworthy bones. The selection of beers was limited, but at least they were only slightly warm. The ground rattled as a giant motorcycle came roaring down the mountain. It spewed clouds of screaming smoke, and its wheels split the earth in its wake. It could have crushed Nigel without slowing down, and he would have expected it. The gods of the orcs were a merciless lot. Even making it to the mountain didn't earn you a place at their table. Not until one strangled the life from them with one's bare hand did one earn that privilege. The motorcycle came to a sudden stop, kicking up clouds of dust and smoke. When it cleared, the great god Grog stood before Nigel. Grog towered 13 feet high and wore armor made out of thorns. Each of his 5 heads had a giant maw and one eye. His pale skin carried the scars of 1,003 battles against the other gods. Nigel nodded to his ancient god. "Sup?" Grog said. "Not much. Toss me a brew, would you?" Nigel threw a six-pack to his god. Grog shoved it into his jaws, cans and all, and swallowed. "Thanks." "Another?" "No, thanks. I'm driving." Grog cleared his throat and spat out a wad of acidic phlegm that burned its way to the ground. "Nigel Skullgnasher, you have been called." "Right." Nigel chugged the last of his beer, tossed it into a pile of cans and the bones of all the previous challengers. The pile was about twice as tall as the gray mountain. "So, how do we do this?" he asked. "Bare knuckles? Axes? I have a tire iron, or is that against the rules?" Grog chuckled. "There are no rules." "Okay, then I'll just get the tire iron if that's okay with you." "Go ahead." Nigel found his weapon. He swung it a few times to get the feel for it. He knew he couldn't win this fight. According to history, even the legendary orc warlord, Rourke or a Bork, had only put a crack in Grog's toenail before ending up on the unworthy mound, though that had earned his skull the honored position of the very summit, which was more than any orc could honestly hope for. "Ready when you are," said Grog. Nigel charged, and with a mighty roar he smacked the god across the armored shins. The air filled with a steady clang. as he pounded on that one spot until his arms grew heavy. Only until he was thoroughly exhausted, until he could no longer hold the iron, did he fall to his knees. Wheezing, he wiped the sweat from his brow. How was that? He asked. Anything? Grog shrugged. Not particularly impressive. Go to hell. His god laughed. It was the closest thing he'd give to a nod of approval. Get yourself together. Have another beer. Another? I thought I was only allowed one. It's only if you were dead, said Grog. I'm not? Did I say you were? Nigel stood. He was still out of breath. But the Grey Mountain. Grog spoke with a booming voice that knocked Nigel off his feet. No orc may see it and live. Nigel sat up. Yeah, that. You're still going to die, just not tonight. Nigel stood, grabbed another beer from the cooler. Then why have you appeared to me? No offense, but I didn't think I'd have to see your ugly mug more than once before going on to oblivion. Nor I yours, but I need you to kill someone for me. Uh-huh. Nigel took a drink, belched. You do know I'm an accountant, right? I was not aware of that, admitted Grog. I've never killed anyone before. It's not that hard. Just find something sufficiently sharp or heavy and do what comes naturally. Nigel scoffed. What? Asked Grog. I don't know if you've been paying attention or not, but I live in a more civilized age. Just because my ancestors were barbaric hordes, and that doesn't mean I'm a natural-born killer. I think it's a bit racist that you assume that. That's uncalled for. Isn't it, though? Said Nigel. You appear to me in a vision and demand I kill someone. Surely there must be someone more qualified for the job. I am the greatest god of the orcs, said Grog. I work with what fate has given me. I have to imagine there are one or two orc killers out there who could appear to you. I'm sorry. I have to imagine there are one or two orcs out there who you could appear to. Grog stomped the ground with his foot, and the Grey Mountain rumbled. Enough! I don't have time to explain myself to you. I am your god, whether you like it or not. I'm here to charge you with a holy mission, so shut the hell up and just accept it. All right. Don't get your panties in a bunch. Although, why me? Because you have sworn the oath to serve me, have you not? Nigel said, I don't remember that. Grog cleared his throat. I, Nigel Skullgnasher, vow to honor the spirit of the wilderness. Sound familiar? It did. It was the oath he'd taken when joining his motorcycle club. He hadn't thought much of it at the time. So that counts, he asked. Am I also not known as the spirit of the wilderness? I don't know, are you? I am. I didn't know that, said Nigel. It still counts. It was Nigel's own damn fault. Orc religion mostly involved ignoring the gods and having them ignore you in return. But the hideous gods had a wealth of nicknames. Mostly, Nigel suspected, for situations like this. Some he suspected were made up on the spot, but since there was no way to prove that, it was pointless to argue. Fine, who am I going to kill? The sand swirled and formed into two statues of Helen and Troy. Wow, she's a biggin, said Nigel. And the human, he's Asian. Does he know karate? Grog rolled his eyes. You call me racist. Hey, if this kid has a kung fu grip, it's probably something I should know. Your fears bring shame to your ancestors, said Grog. My ancestors can kiss my ass. They didn't have to figure out a way to kill someone after already using up all their personal days at the office. I have a performance review at the end of the month, by the way. Not that I expect you to care. Good, because I don't. So where do I find these two? Asked Nigel. You will be sent a seer, a guide to show you the way. You can't just give me their names and addresses. Grog said, There are rules we must follow. I thought you said there were no rules. I may have been exaggerating. Grog mounted his monstrous motorcycle. We're seeing you, Nigel. He revved his engine, and the screaming black smoke enveloped Nigel. He stepped awake, and for a moment he thought it might all have been just an ordinary dream. Then the phone rang. He answered it in the middle of the second ring. His wife stirred in the bed but didn't wake. It was Peggy Truestalker from the church. It was Peggy Truestalker from the club. She'd had the dream too and had been chosen to be his guide. After they both grumbled about the situation, he hung up and made plans to see her the next day. The phone rang again. It was another club member. Nigel hadn't been the only one called upon by Grog. The entire club had been charged with the mission. It seemed like overkill for two people, even if one of them was 7 feet tall and the other might possibly know kung fu. But he was in no position to question anything. After the fourth call, he left the phone off the hook and crept up to his attic to find his grandfather's old battle axe. He wiped away some of the dust. His grandfather had killed over 30 Nazis with this axe during the war and slain the last Axis ice dragon at the Battle of the Bulge. Nigel had the medals stashed somewhere. He swung the axe a few times, then sliced a steamer trunk in half with one stroke, Grinning, he picked at the pieces of frost along the edge of the cut. The enchantment from the dragon's final breath still clung to the weapon. Though Nigel wasn't keen on killing anyone, he was excited about getting a chance to break it out, to test himself in real battle and make his grandfather proud. Although a Minotaur and a kid probably weren't up there with a dragon, but beggars couldn't be choosers. His wife shouted from below, "Nigel, what the hell are you doing up there at this time of night?" He said something about hearing rats. "We better call the exterminator tomorrow," she shouted. "I don't want those things chewing up my mother's quilts." Nigel picked a thread clinging to the axe blade. The halved steamer trunk and its sheared, quilted contents stared back at him. Ah, damn. "What's that? Did you say something?" Nigel set the axe down. "Nothing, dear." And there you go. That's chapter 4 of Helen and Troy's epic road quest. I'll show you again. Boop. And Nigel is an important character in the Wild Hunt, and they show up and are a big obstacle for our heroes, and they become important. And I hope you enjoyed the book. I hope you enjoyed this reading. Sorry if if I paused at some place to get confused. I only wrote the book. But anyway, thanks, and appreciate your time.